All right. Again, good afternoon, everyone. I think we'll get started now for today's meeting. Uh, this is the third of three stakeholder work group meetings we've had recently based on the development of our draft report, which is still in development currently. And today's meeting will be focused on the review of the policy recommendations workshop, essentially what we heard. So Justin, could you go to the next page, please, or slide? Next slide. So, just to go over today's agenda, we'll be turning it over to Justin to go over some webinar logistics, go over the content again of the draft 2025 needs assessment, discuss really, I think, the input we received on sustainable funding sources, essentially like the discussion scenarios that we talked about at the policy recommendation workshops held in May and June, just reviewing the needs assessment delivery schedule and just wrap up the next steps. I will be doing the wrap up and next steps because our student assistant is actually in a class right now, so she unfortunately could not make it today. So with that, Justin, I'm going to turn it over to you for webinar logistics.
All right, thank you, Francis. Welcome everyone to the October 1st, 2024 Senate Bill 1121 Policy Recommendations Review Workshop. The CTC exists to make transportation planning, funding, and policy more understandable and accountable. Our workshops can take place throughout the state or virtually, so the staff can hear directly from our stakeholders throughout California. We are pleased to now offer hybrid and fully virtual workshops to allow you, the stakeholder, the opportunity to participate more fully no matter where you are. The workshop agenda is located on our website at www.catc.ca.gov. Any document the CTC creates can be translated into any language you need. Simply email us at ctc@catc.ca.gov. We will have them returned to you as quickly as possible. Live closed captioning is available on this webinar. Please select the Show Captions tab at the bottom of your screen. There are a number of language options available there to choose from. For all our workshops, we encourage interaction with our stakeholders. There will be opportunity for questions and comments throughout the workshop. For those attending via Zoom, you should see the webinar control panel, likely located on the bottom of your screen. There you will find the raise hand and Q&A tabs. We encourage you to use the raise hand feature as soon as we reach the public comment item to give the system time to acknowledge you, and staff will let you know when it's your turn to make your comment. Alternatively, you may use the Q&A tab to submit your comment or question, and staff will read that on your behalf. As a reminder, each registered attendee is provided a unique link or number to access the webinar, and they should not be shared with other participants, as this can create confusion for staff when making comments. Do your best to be concise, and make sure that your comments add new information. If you agree with the comments of a previous speaker, simply make that statement. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thanks, Justin. Could you go to the next slide or two? Okay, this slide here, yes. So just a quick over. Oh, I'm sorry. Did someone say something? No. Okay, just a quick overview on Senate Bill 1121. It was signed by the legislature in 2022 and identified the commission to prepare a 10-year statewide transportation needs assessment that would assess the costs to operate, maintain, and grow the statewide multimodal transportation system, consider costs to address climate resiliency, and to compare those costs against available transportation revenue. Many of you have heard this, but just wanted to put that out there again that, this is what we are doing with the needs assessment. Next slide, please, Justin. Oh, here we go. So in terms of the content review, next slide, please. This is just an outline of or chapter headings of the draft 2025 needs assessment that were currently developing still. Again, just kind of how it's broken down and how it's structured broadly. Next slide, please. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Linda Pierce from NCE, who has been the principal that I've been working with as we've been developing the draft report. So Linda, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Fantastic. Thanks, Francis. Next slide, please, Justin. All right, so as Francis noted, that these were the scenarios that we were looking at in the previous webinar. And just again, kind of the highlight, the 4 scenarios, do nothing, which really is to continue as is, the standard fuel tax, federal and state, doing the transportation improvement fees, that whatever is in place today continues. Certainly there's pros and cons to each one of these, and I'll kind of hit the highlights. I don't want to obviously read the slide. But certainly the good thing about the do nothing option or the continue as is everybody knows what it is. It's very familiar. We know you go to the pump, you pay the fuel tax. If you're a zero emission vehicle, you pay the transportation improvement fees and the road improvement fees. Of course, the difficult part of this is it is not sustainable by any means. It is not able to keep up with what the needs are. So the revenue generated from the gas tax and the various fees just isn't really able to support transportation. And again, the good thing is California is not unique. This is something that every state is facing. The next scenario is to go ahead and adjust the existing revenue mechanisms. And so what this would mean would be to increase the state fuel tax, maybe increase the transportation and the road improvement fees. Again, the pros of this, it's something that it does increase the revenue. And again, it is something that everybody knows about. Certainly the challenge with this is it could be a potential burden on the lower income users, higher fees. We all know what that feels like. And it really doesn't address the issue about the increase in zero emission vehicles and the decrease in gas tax, diesel tax revenue as those zero emission vehicles increases with time. The third option is this phased in replacement of the existing mechanism with a road charge. And so as we discussed, it certainly is more equitable than scenario B. So everybody kind of pays the same amount regardless of what type of vehicle you drive. It's a little bit challenging because it's a new type of system. And so having this phased in approach does give the public time to get familiar with the process. Certainly allows the state to be able to address any possible challenges they have in setting up the program, setting up how the fee structure is. All those things can kind of be worked out in this phased in approach. Certainly the great thing is it does not address short-term needs, but will address the longer-term needs. And so, just looking at a portion of the vehicles being charged a road charge, you're not getting everybody on board yet. And so it is only going to look more for long-term, because eventually you'll be at the full replacement, which is option D. So go ahead and take a look at that. Everybody is now charged a road charge. It's more equitable than all the previous ones again. So you're applying the charge regardless of what type of vehicle you drive. It does increase the revenue. And again, this is a con, and I think this is just a little bit of a hurdle that one needs to get over. I don't see it as oh my gosh, we can't do it because of this. But it is a different fee structure, and it is a different collection process on the fee. But again, I think with time, that's something that could be easily overcome. All right, next slide, please. So this is really just to kind of show how the equitable road charge is applied. So the image on the left is let's make the assumption that, hey, these people are all driving 1,000 miles. The current fuel tax is in play. Electric cars are looking at a road improvement fee. And so as you go from left to right on that left image, you go from an electric car, the hybrid at 50 miles per gallon, an average efficiency car at 30 miles per gallon, and then a low efficiency car or truck, in this case, SUV at 20 miles per gallon. And then you can kind of see a little bit about $10 for the electric car, about $30 for the low efficiency vehicle, just for those 1,000 miles. And so it's really, you know, the electric car's got great efficiency. It's got the lowest fuel tax, of course, because there is no fuel tax. It's all the improvement fee. And so you can kind of see the lower efficiency car, you're probably paying almost 3 times that of the electric car, but you're using the same roadway. So what this road charge fee then does is the image on the right, it really says, hey, for every 1,000 miles driven, it doesn't matter what vehicle you are, you're going to be charged $25 as an example in this case. And so that's where that equity comes in. The more miles you drive, the higher your tax. But if you're all driving the same miles, you're all getting the same tax. Next slide. So during the webinar, there was a number of discussions and suggestions that were revolving around the scenarios. And these are kind of the, I mean, there's obviously, there was a lot of discussion, and they are being captured. They were recorded. But I kind of gleamed out these 4 that seem to be specifically related to the revenue as well as to the road charge. So the first one was somebody had mentioned, hey, let's look at using managed lanes, but allowing that revenue to come back to the state for transportation improvements, rather than, I think it's going now to the general fund possibly. There was comments about the phased-in adoption. You know, there's a number of people like the phased-in approach. This one person said that, you know, we're going to go ahead and do this phased-in approach, but let's not forget about equity in the decision of how the charges are applied, as well as accountability to those first principles that we were kind of steering the development of these scenarios with. And you have to go back. I didn't include the first principles here, but you have to go back to previous meetings and you can find out what those were. One person suggested that let's apply the road charge to trucks first. So this would be not you know, the F-150 type truck, but this would be like the semis and the larger trucks that are on the roadway. And then the other one comment was that, hey, let's do a road charge that is not revenue neutral. That's kind of been the discussion, but hey, we can actually maybe get a little bit ahead of this, addressing the needs through this road charge. All right, next slide, please. So what I wanted to do here is to show that, you know, as I mentioned, the decline or the challenges with fuel excise tax is something that is, you know, across the United States. It's very obvious on this one slide that there's something happening on the other side of the east side of the country, but I can guarantee you there are agencies or there are states that are looking at road charges. So just because the right half of that figure is great, that doesn't mean they're not doing anything. But I guess what I wanted to showcase is that there's a couple states, specifically Oregon and Utah, who have had a road charge for quite some time. The Oregon has been in place since 2015, so they're, you know, almost 10 years. And it is for electric and for fuel efficient vehicles, so not specifically just hybrids. But if you've got a you know, something that's extremely like 40, I think it's 40 miles per gallon or better, you can actually come into the road charge process, and I'll explain what those are in the next couple of slides as well. Utah similarly is looking at in 2020 they're doing both hybrids and electric vehicles, and then there are pilot studies, as we know, in California, Colorado, Hawaii, Pennsylvania, and Washington State as well. And then all of the other states that are shown in that teal color are monitoring. And like I said, I know there's efforts in Minnesota, Missouri, Ohio, Florida, Mississippi. So there's other states that are happening, that are actually actively looking at this. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a little bit of a dive into what Oregon and Utah do. It is for passenger vehicles only, and both of the systems are on a volunteer basis. I do also want to make a note, and it's just interesting to dive into these a little bit more. Oregon currently, I think the number is like 70,000 registered owners of electric vehicles. Utah is slightly higher. Keep in mind that California is at 1.8 million registered zero emission vehicles. So there's a little bit difference about the fee structure. So I don't want anybody to make the assumption that the fee structure that Oregon and Utah do will be what the fee structure is that California is going to do. But these are just two examples, drastically different as well. So don't, I guess don't jump to that conclusion just yet about, oh my gosh, we're going to have to pay 2 cents a mile in California. That's something that is yet to be established. So on the Oregon side, as I said, it's electric and fuel efficient vehicles above 40 miles per gallon. Be a MPG rather than MPH there. The vehicle registration fee, so every year they're paying $43. There is a road charge of 2 cents per mile. And then for the fuel efficient vehicles, because they wanted to make sure they weren't being double taxed, there is a fuel tax credit of 38 cents per gallon. So there's actually a process, and I think fuel tax in Oregon, the state fuel tax, I believe, is 48 cents. And so they have a process by which they submit the receipt. I'm not sure. They submit the receipts or do something and are able to get a credit back. Again, so they're not being double taxed. Now, if you happen to be an electric vehicle and you are not part of the road charge process, your vehicle registration fee is $158 per year. And then obviously you're not charged for any roadway usage. Similarly, the fuel efficient vehicles in the non-road charge category, there's a vehicle registration fee of $78 per year. And the other interesting thing is that if you take a look at this and you say, well, gee, how many miles do I need to travel to exceed my 158 or to meet my $158 per year if I decided not to participate in the road charge? And you run those numbers and it's about 3,500 miles a year. And so at least in Oregon, and it's going to be the same case in Utah, and I'll discuss that in a minute, but they're really this is really beneficial for those people that don't drive a lot of miles. They're still trying to be equitable. So everybody that, ideally everybody that uses the road pays the same. But at least they're starting out slow, they're starting out low, just to get those people where it could be possibly beneficial if you're only driving, back and forth to the grocery store, and you're not, collecting a lot of mileage on your vehicle. So Utah has a similar approach in that there is a fee applied every year. So the electric vehicles, it's $130. For hybrids, it's about $22 per year. The road charge then is $1.52 per mile. And what happens is if you enter into the road charge application or the process, you are charged 1.52 cents per mile, and then the number of miles that you drive, if how am I going to say this? If you're paying $130, I'm sorry, if you're paying $130, the road charge that you accumulate in a given year cannot exceed the fee of $130. So if you're looking at, and this is why I gave this little example, if you're looking at an electric vehicle is driving about 8,500 miles per year, that equates to about the $130 per year. And so if you happen to double that, you're only going to ever pay $130 per year in Utah. I probably made that very confusing. But if anybody's got a question, I can clarify that a little bit more, but I don't want to continue to ramble on something that I might have messed up speaking as clearly as I possibly could. But regardless, if you're driving a lot of miles in Utah, electric vehicle, you'll pay no more than $130 per year. If you're a hybrid, you'll pay no more than $21.75 per year. Whew. Francis, I think I'm going to stop and turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Linda. And, you know, just to emphasize, I think both, again, the Oregon and Utah programs are on a voluntary basis, correct? And a point to note, I think that Hawaii did sign into law that they would enact a road charge program, I believe. So I think they're out of the pilot phase, I believe, but I'll double check. But Justin, can you go to the next slide, please? Overall feedback from the workshops, generally what we heard from participants is that, you know, a phased-in replacement of the existing mechanisms with a road charge seemed like the most likely scenario to potentially happen in California at some point. And, you know, really that means applying, you know, a road charge first to zero emission passenger vehicles. This is just what we heard in the workshops when we were talking about the scenarios. In addition to that, you know, we did touch briefly on vehicle registration fees and some of the pros and cons there. And it is something that we're going to look into a little bit more to see what research is out there. But, you know, there are concerns over whether or not that was really equitable. Some of the things that were good about a potential vehicle registration fee was that, you know, there's already an existing mechanism in place to collect something like that. But just a few additional points there. But, you know, pivoting to Senate Bill 339 and related to a comment, I think that is in the Q&A and that I'll get to. You know, this is the first road charge pilot where it's collecting revenue. So it'll be really interesting to see what this pilot study is going to have in terms of the report once it's finalized. It's currently being piloted. It began in August and the pilot program will end in January. So I think we're very excited to see what those results are. You know, and how people feel about being charged a road charge. So that's something that's coming out in the future, unfortunately, you know, after a report, but I think it'll be really interesting to see how this 6-month pilot program goes. With that, I'll go to the next slide and pause there and get to the questions, I believe. Yeah, so with that, I'll stop here and, you know, I'll take some of the questions, Justin, that we have or comments, I think.
All right, Francis, thank you. Yeah, we did receive 2 written questions at this time. First one, the comment is, the slide outlining the pros and cons does not include several key points discussed in the research. For instance, the do nothing option has advantages such as the ease of implementation and tax collection, while a VMT charge would likely be more costly and challenging to implement.
I just wanted to say thank you for those points. You're correct that, you know, it is an existing sort of process, so you wouldn't, you know, have to navigate how that collection would be. So thank you for pointing that out in terms of what a pro would be with the existing mechanisms here. So yes, thank you. And I think the second question or comment.
Yes, so we had a second question. This one came in from Warren Whitaker. They ask, does slide 14 reflect the recommendation in the draft needs assessment.
Justin, could you go back to slide 14? Oh, okay. So this is just more of input that we got, Warren, that we're just re-highlighting. We still haven't finalized our recommendations in the draft needs assessment currently. And, in part, we're coming back today, to go over what we gathered and any additional comments or input everyone here may have as we continue, finalizing the draft to be released later this fall. Laura, is there anything you wanted to note? Nope. Okay.
And then Francis, I do have an attendee with their hand raised at this time.
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to call on Eric Bronson.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for all your work. This is great stuff. I really appreciate how hard I know you're working on this. I would just a kind of a feedback on slide 10, if you want to go back to slide 10. If and when you present this in a report or whatever you end up doing with this, I would either change the dollar amount on the 4 right sides or raise those bars, because the first thing I saw in this is okay, so if I was going to have to pay a road charge, it'd be $25, which is more than 3 of the 4 sides on the left-hand side have to pay. I think that's giving a bad representation. So I think, and it looks almost like you're trying to hide what that means by making the bars lower than the $19 on the other side. So just for visual purposes, it might be good to, I know that Linda wasn't proposing $25 per month, but just be careful of what you put here, because people are going to take what they see as if that is what it is. And so just, visually presenting, got to be real careful about what we say.
Thank you, Eric, for your comment there. And we'll note that for sure. We definitely borrowed this graphic. So, but I understand. Yes, I understand how it could be perceived. So I appreciate that feedback.
And then Francis, we have one other virtual attendee with their hand raised at this time.
Yes.
I'd like to call on Gus Quarry.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the very informative presentation. Yeah, so just to underscore maybe what Eric was referring to, I think we just need to be slightly cautious with saying that there's an equitable road charge, because the connotation is that everyone is paying the same amount, which isn't really possible given that there's going to be a wild variation in the VMT that's generated per jurisdiction, whether that's city, county residents, etc. So I don't know if there's a different way to maybe wordsmith that. And then just in looking at other alternatives, I think, Francis, as you mentioned, the VRF, it's already established in current law, and it is a more progressive method that may or may not work. Maybe if there's a hybrid or such, but, look forward to working with the commission and other key stakeholders on trying to refine some of our policy recommendations.
Thank you, Gus. I'm glad you're able to participate today.
For sure.
Yeah. All right. Justin, I think we got one more comment.
We did. We received one additional written comment from Mitch Weiss. He comments, also on slide 10, the fees on the left side don't add up to the same as on the right.
Thank you, Mitch. I will touch base with my counterpart on who developed the graph and provide a little more context. I think the feedback we got today on this slide has been really helpful, and we'll definitely kind of craft something in the report that's a little more balanced in different ways.
And then Francis, we did receive a couple more written questions during this time.
Yes.
The next one is a follow-up by Warren Whitaker, they said, thanks for addressing my question. For discussion of road charge, it would be helpful to acknowledge need to also integrate other transportation user fees like tolls. This can be particularly important for equity programs.
Hi, Warren. Thanks for your comment. You know, we got a very good comment, I think, over the summer on whether or not, you know, road charge would be enough to cover existing maintenance. And so this is something that we are going to take into account in the draft needs assessment, and would love to really follow up and touch base with you on that point too, on, you know, what the state is doing and what, you know, is potentially being explored by the regions or as well.
Thank you. Then the last one we have at this time comes from Connie Stewart. She asks, is the road charge for all miles driven? In rural areas, folks may drive on county roads more than highways. Would the distribution change of funding change?
Hi, Connie. So I would say, you know, based on the pilots that have been done, road charge is typically assessed for all miles driven. So not just on the state highway system, but all public roads. So that's been many of the pilot studies that have been done out there. In terms of the distribution of funding being changed, that I feel like it, Laura, I'm gonna defer to you on that. I'm gonna say I'm not sure that that's something that we would explore and discuss. I think should, you know, the state legislature go forward with a road charge. So Laura.
I can chime in here, Francis.
Mhm.
So that is not something that's presently being considered or studied. That's something that would, as you were about to say, Francis, need to be studied, you know, by the legislature, would need to be considered by policymakers. So as we're currently studying road charge in California, it is for miles driven on public roads. We're not going into the nuance of whether those roads are county roads, city roads, or the state highway system. One thing that Caltrans did study was the difference between driving on public roads or private roads. So, you know, that is being studied. I can say that in the current pilot, out of state miles can be detected and subtracted from the miles that are being counted in that pilot. So, you know, the technology is there. In some instances, however, we're really focusing on miles being driven on public roads in what we're studying right now. So it's a really good question, Connie. It's something that definitely needs to be better studied and understood, and will need to be continued to be talked about in the policy discussions around this in the future.
Thanks, Laura. I see one more comment or question, Justin.
Yeah, so we did receive one additional written comment. I also see that Connie has her hand raised at this time. Should I call on her first to
Sure,
respond?
Connie. Yeah.
Okay, great. Connie, you're now free to mute yourself.
Hi there. Thank
Hi.
you. Hi. I also just wonder, for those of us who live near border towns, how would you deal with the fact that people might want to buy their vehicle in Oregon, for example? Would that have any impact on, I mean, we already have that problem with people and registering their cars in other states near our border. So I just wondered whether any thought had gone into that as well.
You know, Connie, this is the first time that this has been brought up to me.
Mhm.
I can check base with my counterpart, you know, that has done a lot more road charge work. But you know, it's the first time that this has been asked, you know, in all our meetings that we've had. So I appreciate your question there about like purchasing a vehicle and registering it across state lines, essentially, correct?
Yeah, you know, it just occurs to me that as you said earlier, there may be other opportunities to study more questions as we get closer to finding a solution on here. And I just wonder for some of the rural counties and the border counties, whether people would think they could game the system by buying a car in another state.
it's definitely an enforcement issue, Connie, and thanks for bringing it up. I think we should certainly follow up with Caltrans and see how they've been, thinking about it with DMV. And I think anytime the state of California is, implementing any sort of laws or regulations that are stricter than those of other states, to think about how, to make sure that it's fair for the folks who are following the rules versus ones who might be trying to figure out how to make purchases out of state. So it's a good point. We can take that back and figure out an answer.
All right, thanks, Laura. Justin, I think we have a question, correct, from Christine?
Yes, thank you, Francis. Yes, so from Christine, is it possible to add a chapter on fish and wildlife connectivity needs to the 2025 Transportation Needs Assessment? Chapter 9 on climate adaptation challenges could also identify where climate adaptation priorities overlap with fish and wildlife connectivity needs to identify opportunities for multi-benefit improvement.
Hi, Christine. So I think one of the really big takeaways from climate adaptation that we, have done for this report is taking it at a very high level of how much I think the state has been spending thus far to address like climate adaptation related infrastructure, not needs, but sort of just infrastructure being rebuilt. We are working with Caltrans on this front to highlight what information we do know in terms of a cost potentially, but we are taking a much higher level view right now on adaptation priorities, and would touch on sort of wildlife at a very high level, but not necessarily, I think, quite at the granular detail. That would, I think, really be deferred to the more specific reports at that level. But Laura, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add on that front.
No, nothing to add, Francis. Thank you.
Yeah. But Christine, you can follow up with me with any specific questions too, and we can have a one-on-one discussion as well.
Okay, Francis, not seeing anything else at this time.
Okay. Again, if anyone has any additional questions, you're always welcome to reach out and email us. We're happy to set up meetings with you to discuss any additional questions that come up after today's meeting too. So just wanted to highlight that again. Justin, if you could just briefly go over or go to the slide just with the delivery schedule. So, again, just highlighting what we've done thus far this year. On January 28th, we did submit the final interim needs assessment to the legislature. We held 2 technical workshops on the information that we were gathering from our regional transportation planning agencies and metropolitan planning organizations on the extended fiscal needs survey that was sent out, to gather data on our 10-year needs and revenue. And then in the spring, I think technically it was still spring, on June 17th, we held 2 policy recommendation workshops that were hybrid format. So one in Southern California and one in Northern California with virtual options there. And then, we have continued from that point to really begin the development of our draft needs assessment, reviewing the data that we got from all the agencies, and then, put on our stakeholder work group meetings in September and from today. And more than likely, we'll follow up with a few more work group meetings before we submit the final needs assessment to the legislature. But in terms of when we are anticipating the release of the draft, It will be in the fall, most likely in November. So, we will notify everyone when we do release the draft. And then we will submit to the legislature in January, the final needs assessment. So with that, the next slide is just our contact information, or I should say wrap up the next steps. So again, this is just really the next steps. I will notify everyone when we definitely release the draft, and also any additional work group meetings that will be coming out before the release of the draft as well. So with that, just our contact information in the next slide. So I don't know if there are any additional questions. If not, please, thank you for joining us today. Please do send us any additional questions that you may have. If you would like to meet with us one-on-one to discuss anything, we are more than happy to meet with you. So really appreciate the feedback today. And we'll see you all soon.